As business owners and entrepreneurs, we create for a living. We create new ideas, we create new businesses, we create new products, we create new podcasts. You know the drill. On the flip side, one thing a lot of us fail to think of is how we are going to protect what we create. What do I mean? For you listening to the podcast, you own a business, you own a brand, or whatever you own. Do you have a trademark for that thing you created? This is the Tech Your Business podcast where we break down technology, inform you about the latest in technology to help your business learn more, earn more, and do more. My name is Peter, and this will be a guest episode. And we'll be talking trademarks, like I mentioned before, and intellectual property with today's guest, Kelli Jones. So, welcome to the show, Kelli.
Thanks so much for having me.
I think we were just talking a few minutes ago about how trademarks are like insurance. You never know you need them till it's too late most of the time.
Exactly. You never know when you're going to need it. And hopefully, just like insurance, hopefully you never really have to rely on having it.
Yeah. Okay, so I was reading your profile and you mentioned that not owning a trademark means that you are renting your brand. And that really bothered me. So I think I'll have to ask that question first of all
Yeah,
before
yeah, sure.
anything.
Yeah. So, I think a lot of people think that if they form a business entity like an LLC or a corporation or, whatever it is called in your jurisdiction, they think that that means that they've owned the name that they've registered it under. But that's really not the case. When you get that type of whatever business entity it is, the purpose of that really is to protect your personal assets, your house, your car, your bank accounts, your investment accounts should anything go wrong in your business. But it doesn't really have anything to do with the name that you chose itself. So that's really where the trademark comes in. The trademark is what you apply for to get ownership over the name itself of, for a lot of people, maybe it's their business name. Sometimes it's a logo, a tagline, a course name, a podcast name, basically anything that is like an important part of your brand that you're using in connection with, to help identify your goods and services. So that's really what I mean by you don't really, when you don't have the trademark, you're essentially just, you're using that name, but you don't really have ownership rights over it until you have the registered trademark.
Oh, okay. Now that's that's really bothering because I think most times, even for me, I used to feel before a few seconds ago that when I register a company name, like my company is in the UK, so the LLC equivalent is a
Mhm.
limited company. So I used to feel when you own a limited company, own a you own the name. But now you're saying that I don't own the name, I'm renting the name. So that's a bit of an issue to me. So what would you say? You said that the LLC is basically to protect your assets. I think they call it limited liability, separate you from the
Mhm.
business. So what you're saying is that when you own a company, you have to have a trademark too.
So they're for different things. So the business entity is good for that asset protection, but the trademark is really where you're getting ownership over the name itself. So yeah, it's just like different legal things cover different purposes, and that's the trademark is to get the purpose of ownership over that brand name.
Hmm, interesting. All right, so let's talk about trademarks. I know you mentioned that you make legal stuff a lot less boring. I try to make tech stuff a lot less boring too because
Yeah, they're not the most
yes,
fun areas for people. So
yeah. So can you give us maybe a less boring way of explaining what owning a trademark means?
yeah. So, I mean, really, it's just that's the way that you get ownership over your name. That way, you're not worrying about copycats popping up with the same or similar name as you. Basically, that's how you prevent people from being confused between your brand and someone else's brand because that's ultimately the purpose of the trademark, and that's why you would want one, right? Because you don't want, like Starbucks, they have a trademark for their brand. They don't want some other business coming up also selling coffee, naming like Starbucks design or, like Starbucks marketing, like they don't want anything. Starbucks roast. Like they don't want anything similar, or even like starstruck. Like maybe that is potentially a little confusing too because it's kind of similar. So you don't want these other people popping up with something that is going to confuse your customer. You don't want your customer to be like, "Oh, I just saw this ad for something else pop up and it's kind of a similar name to yours. Now like are you connected? Are you working together? Like are they copying you? Are you copying them?" So that's really the whole purpose of it. You don't want you want your brand to stand out. So then you want to make sure that you own it. That way, if someone else does pop up, you have the registration. That way you can hopefully get them to stop using it.
Yeah. Okay. So let's we've talked about those ones. So let's talk about you, Kelli Jones, and what you do.
Yeah, so I've had my own firm now for almost this year. This month will be 4 years. So I mainly work with small business owners, entrepreneurs, helping them with trademarks, contracts, other like business startup things and strategies and stuff like that. Before that, I was working for a couple nonprofits and then also a private firm. So I've been a lawyer for 10 years, but have had my own firm for four. And I am living in Nashville in Tennessee, and I practice in primarily in the US or for anyone looking to file a trademark in the US.
Okay. So let's go back to trademarks. Okay, you just mentioned looking to file a trademark in the US. So let's say my business is registered in the UK, and okay, like for this podcast now, it's owned by the business in the UK,
Mhm.
but probably maybe 60-70% of the listeners are in the US. If I file a trademark in the UK, does it protect the business in the US, and vice versa? If you file a trademark in the US, where does it protect? Do you have to file in all countries or just one?
Yeah, so typically you're getting protection in the country that you file in. So, some businesses will have a trademark registered in just one country. Maybe that's where they primarily do business, or that's where most of their listeners are or whatever. And then some businesses, maybe they'll start out at one country and then they'll end up expanding to others. Like some countries might start selling products in one country and then expand, like, okay, now we're going to sell in Canada. Now we're going to sell in France or something like that. And then they'll file in additional countries. So, really, like, the question I always ask people when they're looking to file is like, where are primarily your consumers, customers, listeners, whatever it is, located, and start there first and then expand if necessary.
Okay, because I think one extension of me asking this question is you see a couple of products that are created, and then you see knockoffs of these products, especially from Asia, being created too. So does that mean that happens because they didn't file the trademarks there or something?
So yeah, sometimes there are like copycats and stuff like that that will pop up in other places. And it really then it can be tough depending on how they're selling, like where they're selling, if the original business owner can end up like getting them to stop or not. So yeah, that can really depend on what they file. And then also, in some instances, there are some businesses that have had to like slightly rebrand their name in different countries, like the store TJ Maxx. It's TJ Maxx in the US. In the UK, I know
Oh,
it's
and
TK Maxx,
TK
but
Maxx, yeah.
yeah, and that's because in the UK there was already another business that was like I think it was TJ Hughes, and that was too similar
Ooh.
to TJ Maxx. So that's why they switched it to TK Maxx in the UK. So same business, but different names in different countries because of trademarks. And I know there's a couple other businesses like that too. Um, there's like a fast food one I think that's like different in different countries. And those are like trademark issues because they didn't have it, they had it maybe in their first country and then they hadn't yet expanded it to the other one. So then they had to
Yeah.
slightly rebrand for a different country.
Funny enough, I never knew that about. I noticed it because I shop a lot with TK Maxx. shopping as a
Mhm.
TK Maxx. I noticed the TJ Maxx and I'm like, okay, this might be a knockoff. I never really knew that that was the reason.
Yeah, I was in London last summer and I was like, "This looks the same, but it's
Yeah.
TK, not TJ." I'm like, "What?" Like, the stuff inside is the same, like, same branding, so then I looked it up and I was like, "Oh, that's
Oh,
interesting."
just the J and the K.
Yeah.
Yeah. So okay. So enjoy this discussion on trademark. So if when you have a trademark, is it something that needs to be renewed or it's something you do once?
So, I can't speak to every single country, but for the most part, it does have to be renewed. And that is so, like in the US, for example, you have to renew it between years 5 and 6, then between years 9 and 10, and then every 10 years after. And that's really just because you want to show that you're still using it, still in business, because, businesses rebrand all the time or go out of business. And then you can't really continue to claim ownership over something if you're no longer using it with those whatever goods or services you had it with. So yeah, most do require you to maintain that registration, which just showing that you're still using it.
So that's interesting. So I actually didn't know that. I felt I felt it was something you just do once and you own it for forever and all that. So I had no idea. I think it should be the same thing with UK. I'm not really sure. I'm not familiar with the trademark law. So okay. So if a person, you said you register it, then within year 5 and 6 you renew it, then within year 9 and 10, then 10 years
Hmm.
after that. So let's
Yes.
say you register it and maybe you're not aware or you refuse to renew it and someone uses your trademark. That means you don't have any standing or anything.
So you potentially could, because so anyone that doesn't have, at least this is how it is in the US, when if you don't have a registered trademark, or if your registered trademark has lapsed, so you no longer have a registered trademark, you still have what's referred to as common law rights, which are basically just unregistered trademark rights. But the problem with relying on those like unregistered rights is you don't have the same level of like exclusive ownership protection. So sometimes this means like if someone else, let's say a copycat pops up or someone else, starts using it and you're trying to say like, listen, I have these unregistered rights because I was using it first, that oftentimes it means that you guys are going to have to like fight it out in court and you're relying on these unregistered rights. So you might be able to rely on them, but they might not end up applying to like the entire US. Like maybe they'll only apply to a certain geographical area. This actually happened. The original Burger King in the US is not the chain that we see today. It's actually the original Burger King, there's only one of them. It's in Illinois, and it's because they didn't have a federal trademark. Someone else came, took the name Burger King, started opening it, got the federal trademark, and then because the original Burger King, people that came up with the name, they were only relying on their unregistered rights. The court ended up saying you can keep the name, but you can only use it in a 20-mile radius. So this
Oh.
Burger King that owns the trademark can have everywhere else in the United States except this 20-mile radius, even though they copied your name essentially, but they had the trademark. So you can rely on unregistered rights. Maybe you'll be able to keep it for yourself, but you might be stuck to like this small area. Like that 20-mile radius is all the original Burger King can sell in. They can never open another store. So that's the tough part there.
I'm just imagining being stuck to the 20 mile radius. And you know, this thing you mentioned about the right, I started a food business back in 2014, which shut down in 2017. And I realized, I think 2 years ago, I saw someone using the name, exact name
Hmm.
of that business. I think I didn't really bother. I saw it. Someone actually pointed it out to me. I didn't really just want to bother myself, but I think from what you're saying, I shouldn't really bother myself. I shouldn't really have bothered myself either,
Mm.
because I'm not even running the business apart, around that. And if what you're saying goes, that means I'll probably be stuck to my city or whatever whatever radius which is annoying.
Possibly. Yeah, yeah, it is annoying to have to just rely on that small area. So yeah.
Yeah. So, okay, so you talked about different things earlier in a business that can be trademark, the
Mhm.
business name, product name, podcast, or whatever. Are there any surprising things that you have seen that should be trademarked in a business?
That should be. So really it's anything that you use as part of your brand. So, some people have tons of trademarks, especially bigger companies. They'll have a trademark for like everything, like hundreds of them, for every like product name, product line name, everything. And then smaller businesses will just have, usually their they're the most important part of their brand. So yeah, I mean, some people will trademark like a blog name or something like that, like the name of not a blog post, but the name of their blog theirself.
Mhm.
Some people will trademark like the name of their like TikTok handle or something like that. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of different things that people can trademark. And it's really just what is the most important to you in your business.
Interesting. So, there was something else you mentioned about filing your trademark early in your business being a way to save you thousands of dollars and all that. So, can you just go a bit deeper on that?
Yeah. So I typically say that, it's best to file early for so many reasons. You want to be the first one to file. You don't want to have to rely on these like unregistered rights and get into a situation later on. And really, so the reason for that is if you do have to rely on your unregistered rights, or if someone else gets there first, and you're trying to fight for your brand. At that point, your options are either you rebrand, which usually costs more than it costs initially to file a trademark anyway, especially,
Yeah.
the more money you've put into your brand, the more it's going to cost to rebrand. So your options then are like rebrand, which is costly, or to try to fight for your trademark. And if you're trying to fight and rely on your unregistered rights, it's basically like almost like kind of like litigation. It's through the Trademark Trial and Appeal Board, not a court usually. So it's a little bit different, but it can be really costly. Usually they take a couple years, couple $100,000. So like it's not a cheap thing. I think the trademark office once said that the average cost of this is like 96,000. So, especially for a small business, like that's a lot of money. So, spending like the 3,000, 3,500 earlier in your business to file the trademark versus having to years later either rebrand or spend 100,000 to fight for your brand is, much more expensive. So, I totally get like the thought of like, oh, I'm early in business, do I really want to put like 3,000 into this brand? And that's really where it comes down to like how strongly do you feel about your brand? Like would you be okay rebranding in a couple of years? If so, then maybe don't file, maybe think about filing. But if you don't want to rebrand and don't want to pay 100,000, then it's going to be better to be proactive and do it as early as you can.
Yeah. Okay. So, now I think another thing that is a blocker that prevents people from registering these trademarks is they are not really sure how easy or how complex the process is, because even just looking at the trademark, it's almost you already went through the whole incorporation process, which can be a pain sometimes, getting all
Yeah.
those documents and all that. And then you hear about trademarks, you hear about the things that can go wrong if you don't have them. So sometimes it looks like an intimidating thing to go into. So can you just walk us through the registration process? What should a business owner who wants to register a trademark expect?
Yeah. So typically, I always recommend going through a lawyer just because you're going to be more likely to succeed than if you try to DIY it. So typically, the first step that we do before actually filing is we do a full search. And this is really to assess the risk level of your trademark because we don't want to waste time and money applying for something that maybe is so high risk because of other things that are already registered that, like, we know you're going to have a hard time getting it. So we'd rather know that ahead of time. So we do that. Hopefully, it's not high risk and we can be actually, apply. And then we will, once you apply, you have to wait about 9 months for it to get assigned to
Ooh.
someone at the trademark office to even look at it. So that's why, again, we do the
Wow.
search because we don't want to waste 9 months and then find out then that, like, oh, you wasted money and time. We'd want to know before we file. So we wait about 9 months. They do a search that's similar to the one that we've already done. And that's when they either push your application to the next stage or they issue what's called an office action. This is basically an initial refusal. A lot of people get these. Most of them are for some type of administrative reason that we can like easily, fix and move on. But sometimes you'll get one that says like, oh, your trademark's too similar to someone else's pending or registered trademark. And that is where we that's one of the reasons we do the search. So hopefully we don't get that. But if you do get it, then basically you have to try to differentiate your brand from whatever they cited. Hopefully in the name of itself, you can say, oh, people aren't going to be confused because mine's different than them, or people aren't going to be confused because, I'm selling this. I have a financial consulting firm and they're selling like hair accessories. Like no one's going to be confused. So then after that, it goes to publication, gets published for 30 days where anyone can oppose. Usually this only happens if you try to file something that's very similar to a big brand, which you should never do, like Nike, Disney, like people trying to make a logo that's similar to like the Nike swoosh. Like, no, don't do that.
Yeah.
You're infringing. Um, and then after that, it finally moves to registration. So basically, they estimate that it takes an average of 15 months right now. So that's kind of the process. You go through that and then hopefully get to registration at the end of those 15 months and have that ownership over your brand.
Okay, so is it 9 months plus 15 months, or the 15 months
Total
includes the nine? Oh,
includes.
okay.
Yeah. So the 9 months is
I
just a
was
waiting
scared.
period where literally nothing happens. So yeah. And then the rest of it goes a little bit faster. So yeah.
Okay, that's like a yeah, 3 months. That's actually still a while.
Yeah. Yeah.
But at least I think if people have an idea, they don't know why they should start earlier, because you know that you're going to wait for probably 15 months. So probably you should
Right. And if
get
a
on with it
copycat
faster.
right, and if a copycat, starts popping up during that time, like, you'd rather at least already be in the process than a copycat pop up and you're like, "Okay, now I have to wait 15 months before I own it and fully, like, stop them," and at that point, they could have done damage to your brand already.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so there's this thing I noticed as we were talking about trademarks, because you have a couple of logos. You see some logos where you have the TM in a circle. You see the
Mhm.
ones that have the C in the circle, then some that have the R in the circle. So are these the same thing, or are they
No, so they
different?
mean different things.
Hmm.
So the little TM is basically just a symbol that you intend something to be a trademark. But you don't have to have the registered trademark to use it. You don't even have to have one in process. Maybe you never file. So anyone can use the little TM. It really just means to like intend to put people on notice that you want it to be a trademark. The circle R is what you can use once you actually have a fully registered trademark. So you've gone through the whole process and you're registered. You can use that. And then the circle C actually means copyright. So that's not for trademark. That's like if you're putting it next to like your website at the bottom or like a book or something like that.
Okay, so copyrights, trademarks are different.
Yes. So
Oh,
trademarks, like I said, trademarks are for like ownership over your brand. So, like something that is the identifier, name, logo, tagline, something like that. Whereas copyright is for more of the actual creation. So something that you are publishing, whether it could be like a website, a video, a blog, a photograph, a book, something that you've actually created, that is something that as soon as you publish it, like put it out there in some way, so publish the post on social media, publish a blog post, post a video, you own the copyright to that as soon as you put it out there. Even if you haven't filed it, you can also file your copyright, and then you're entitled to more money if someone infringes. But you hold the copyright regardless as soon as you create it.
I'm actually still bothered about 15 months though.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think you made that really clear. as long as you have an intent to file, but you don't have the copyright, or you haven't even started filing, you can have your TM next to your logo or whatever.
For the trademark, yes.
Yes. Then after you've gone through that 15-month process or whatever, and you have it registered, then you can use the R.
This right, the circle R.
Yes,
Yep.
and yeah, yeah, and then the copyright is maybe for content and things that maybe people can.
Yeah,
There's the
that's
risk of
totally
people.
separate
Yeah.
for your
Oh,
creations. Yep.
okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So I think that made it really clear because I see them a lot of times on websites and found.
Mhm.
Yeah, I don't really pay attention to them, but I notice them.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's interesting. So how has technology changed the you do trademarks for people? You've been doing it for a
Mhm.
while now. So how has technology changed the trademark landscape over time, from your
Well, it's
viewpoint?
definitely changing in the sense that there's also so many more businesses that are doing things digitally, which also changes the like we talked about before about, if you're relying on these unregistered rights and you're narrowed to some type of geographical area, like that's much harder to do. A Burger King, okay, they're only selling to people that can physically go there. So, maybe 20 miles, like, okay. But for an online business, like we're doing business all over. Everyone has, can find you regardless of where you are. So that is something that's definitely changed how also really the importance of trademarks because you don't want to ever get landlocked to some type of mileage when you could potentially be doing business online in a much broader, area. So that has definitely changed things. Also, the more technology, the more, copycats that we see popping up on all these different things, the more people, you say something online and other people take it right away and they're like, "Oh, I'm gonna go file a trademark for that because they publicly announced it and they didn't file."
Yeah.
So, definitely noticing, like, the increase in that where, obviously social media wasn't around, like, 20 plus years ago, so it wasn't as, no one was gonna copy your name that you launched for your company and go and file a trademark for it, whereas, like, now that is something that I see happening.
Hmm. Interesting. So that means there's a lot more work for you because of technology.
Yeah, and more risk for business owners, so,
Yeah,
yeah.
true, true, true.
Mhm.
True. So, for listeners who are listening to this episode now and they're thinking, "Oh, okay, now this I've seen how important this is. I know the difference between a trademark and a copyright." And
Mhm.
okay, what about patents? Yes.
Mhm. Yeah, so patents are mainly for some type of invention. So and there's different types. So that is something really typically if someone like has some type of thing that they invented, I typically would send them to a patent lawyer and that's what I would always recommend because patent lawyers actually take like an additional bar exam. So there's, like a lot of lawyers that like me that are like business lawyers, intellectual property lawyers, we don't do patents also because usually people that lawyers that do patents have some type of like technical or like science background in addition
Hmm.
and they've taken an additional bar as well. So usually I say like if you have some type of invention thing that you invented, whether that's, like a process, a software, something like that, go to a patent lawyer and talk about it. It's usually also the type of intellectual property that takes the longest to protect and is the most expensive of, it's like copyright and then trademarks, the amount of money and time, and then patents up here.
Hmm.
So also because, it's you've put more into it, you've probably put more money into creating whatever invention this is as well. So yeah, any type of invention, something like that, speak to a patent lawyer and see if what they say about
I'm actually learning a whole lot today.
it. Yes.
Okay, so back to the question before I got sidetracked by patents. um, for if anyone listening understands everything now and they say, okay, I definitely need a trademark for my business, my brand, my whatever. What's something that they
Mhm.
can do this week to get started with getting that trademark?
Yeah. So there's two things really. So one is you could schedule a consultation. We can talk about it, talk about the process, the risk level of what you're using, all that kind of stuff. Another thing that you could do is you could go to the USPTO website and do their free basic search. So just like Google USPTO trademark search and it'll come up. And that is, it's not the same full search that we do to assess the risk level, but it's a good starting point. So you can go in, you can put your brand, your brand name, your product name, whatever it is in there and kind of like see what results you get because sometimes that alone can help you identify like some type of major red flag with your brand where maybe you'll see, oh, someone already applied for this like very similar name as me, like maybe now I know, maybe I'm in the early stages and I can rebrand, or I could see what's out there and be like, oh, okay, I don't see anything similar. Like maybe I'm okay and I can, look into this process now. So that is a great starting point. Also, if you're ever coming up with anything new, like a new course, anything like that, I always recommend people to go do that basic free search to kind of just before you start branding something, look and see, oh, does someone else already trademark that? That way it can save you some time and money down the road.
Okay, so I think that's really good advice. And for anyone who wants to learn more about trademarks, for business owners who want to learn more about trademarks, is there any way you can direct them to?
Yeah, so I definitely do post tons of content about it. So you can go to my Instagram at lawyer Kelly with an I underscore. Also, I have a blog, yourlegalera.com, that has tons of free information as well that I regularly post on.
Okay, so Lawyer Kelly and your blog. You can go there, learn more about trademarks and how it's going to be on the show notes, it's going to be on the screen once this goes live. So you can just go there and knock yourself out. I've learned a lot today, so I know I know anyone listening would also have learned a lot from this episode. And so thank you so much, Kelly, for sharing with us.
Yeah, of course. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah. So, is there anything else I haven't talked about that you feel will be interesting or important to the audience?
I think we definitely covered a lot. So I think I think we're set.
All right. So for the audience, if there is anything I didn't cover, we didn't cover, you know where to go. Kelly's Instagram, Kelly's website is going to be on the screen right here. So thank you so much for listening to this podcast. And did you get any value from this episode? If you did, please share it. Share it with anybody who has a product, who has asked a question about trademarks, who is confused about the TM and the R and the C. Yeah, and who has challenges with trademarks or whatever, who has a wonderful product, whatever, just share it with them. And if you want to be the first person to know when we post more helpful content like this for your business, don't forget to follow, like, and subscribe to the podcast wherever you're seeing us on or hearing us on. So we're almost 100 episodes in, so that, and we release an episode a week. So that means if you listen to maybe 10 or 15 episodes a day, you're going to be on track till we bring out the next episode next week. So thank you so much for listening. Thank you, Kelly, for coming on, and bye for now.
Thanks so much.